On today's episode, we're diving deep into a space development that sounds like pure science fiction, but it's very real. China is reportedly constructing a nuclear power plant on the moon, while SpaceX prepares for another Starship launch, and NASA appears to be backing off from major lunar ambitions. The world of space exploration is shifting fast, and the power players are repositioning for the next great race. This time not just for flags and footprints, but for permanent presence and control beyond Earth. It's no longer about just reaching the moon. Now it's about staying there. And China, alongside Russia, is leading this bold new path. Let's start with the moon base. China and Russia have officially inked a deal to build a nuclear power plant on the moon. This announcement confirms months of speculation, as both countries had been hinting at something major behind closed doors. Their respective space agencies had already been in talks, with vague statements about joint projects. Now, with this nuclear agreement signed during the Chinese president's visit to Moscow, we finally understand what's going on. This plant will power China's proposed moon base, called the International Lunar Research Station or ILRS, which was first announced in 2021. It's a massive undertaking that, if successful, could change everything we know about lunar exploration. The ILRS is not just a collection of temporary modules. It's planned as a fully robotic and autonomous base located at the moon's south pole. The base will serve as a long-term research and development hub on the moon, with human presence being the next logical step. The timeline for the ILRS has construction starting in the 2030s, and once completed, it will operate without any direct human maintenance. From the very beginning, China described this base as a joint mission with Russia. However, once the Ukraine war began in 2022, mentions of Russia started to disappear from Chinese announcements. Many assumed the partnership had quietly ended. But this recent agreement has brought it back into the spotlight, and with nuclear energy being a central feature, this isn't just a symbolic collaboration. Both nations have clarified that, while the initial phase will be robotic and autonomous, the long-term goal is to create a foundation that supports human life on the moon. In fact, earlier this month, Russia's space agency made it clear in a public statement that the ILRS will conduct deep space research, test technologies for long-term autonomous operation, and eventually prepare for humans to live and work there. To make any of this possible, power is essential, especially reliable power that can survive the moon's brutal conditions. The moon has a strange day-night cycle compared to Earth. One lunar day lasts 29.5 Earth days, which means that after 14 days of sunlight, there are 14 days of total darkness. That kind of extreme swing makes solar power unreliable, especially when it comes to long-duration operations. Battery storage is an option, but it comes with problems. Batteries are heavy, and weight is always a massive concern in space missions. Plus, batteries lose efficiency in extreme cold, and the moon gets unimaginably cold during its long night. Temperatures can plummet to nearly -250 degrees Fahrenheit. In these conditions, solar-powered systems would shut down unless paired with heavy-duty thermal and battery backups. That's where nuclear energy steps in. It provides constant power, unaffected by solar cycles or external temperature. Nuclear plants are already used for power in deep space probes. Now, China and Russia want to scale that up for an entire base. Russia brings critical expertise to the table here. The Russian state nuclear agency, Rosatom, is the world's leading producer of nuclear reactors. They've been building and operating nuclear power plants for decades. When it comes to this technology, they're second to none. Combine that with over 70 years of spaceflight experience, and Russia becomes an ideal partner for such an ambitious mission. Of course, they won't be sending a full-size Earth-style reactor to the moon. Instead, they'll likely adapt and shrink down an existing design, making it easier to assemble in pieces and launch into space. The low gravity of the moon, just 1/6 of Earth's, also means the plant will need to be structurally adjusted, but its core design and function will likely remain familiar. The next big question is fuel. On Earth, nuclear plants are powered by solid uranium pellets. These could be pre-manufactured and sent to the moon on cargo rockets, but that's only a temporary solution. Eventually, both China and Russia want to mine fuel directly from the moon, and they might actually be able to do it. Research shows that the moon contains natural deposits of uranium, though it's scattered and mixed with other minerals. If they can develop the technology to extract and process it, that would allow the moon base to operate independently from Earth for the first time ever. According to China's long-term space strategy, the ILRS and its nuclear power plant will be constructed here on Earth first, then broken down into segments, and launched into lunar orbit for assembly. The timeline runs from 2031 to 2035. The actual components of the station, including the research modules and the nuclear plant, will be assembled in a controlled environment before being delivered to the moon. China plans to use its upcoming Long March 9 rocket for this. That rocket is their answer to SpaceX's Starship, a super heavy-class lifter that can deliver massive payloads into space. At least 5 missions are scheduled for construction alone. Still, while the ambition is admirable, the timeline is extremely optimistic. No one, not even NASA, has ever built a moon base, let alone installed and operated a functioning nuclear reactor there. Meanwhile, back in the US, NASA seems to be cutting down its own lunar ambitions. The Gateway Space Station project, once envisioned as a crucial staging point for missions to the moon's surface, is now hanging by a thread. Though several modules have already been built, political and financial challenges are pushing the project toward cancellation. And the problems don't stop there. NASA's massive SLS moon rocket has been plagued by delays and cost overruns. Artemis II, which is supposed to take humans around the moon in 2026, is still technically on the schedule. Artemis III, planned for 2027, will attempt a crewed landing, but even that's uncertain now. After Artemis III, the SLS might be permanently retired. It's a grim outlook for a program once hailed as America's return to the moon. A major part of NASA's moon strategy rests on the success of SpaceX and their Starship program. Starship is meant to be the lander that carries humans to the moon's surface. It's also the rocket that could redefine human space exploration by making large-scale missions affordable and routine. But so far, Starship hasn't lived up to that vision. The last 2 test flights ended dramatically, with the upper stage disintegrating in midair and raining debris over the Atlantic Ocean. These weren't total failures. SpaceX learned a lot, but they were reminders that even SpaceX still has a long way to go. The biggest update for the next Starship launch is that SpaceX will be reusing the same Super Heavy booster from a previous test. That's a big deal. The booster, which flew during Flight 7 in January 2025, survived re-entry and was caught by the massive robotic arms of the Mechazilla launch tower. That booster has been sitting in SpaceX's hangar, undergoing a full inspection and refurbishment. Now, after 4 months, engineers say it's ready to fly again. This will mark the first time that a Starship booster is reused, a milestone that brings SpaceX one step closer to full reusability, the core promise of Starship. But they're not just relying on luck. The new test flight will also feature upgrades to Starship's upper stage design, now labeled version 2. Marks a very important milestone for the entire program. SpaceX has always built its business model on rapid reusability, and this test will show if that approach is really feasible with something as massive and complex as the Super Heavy booster. If this booster can survive multiple flights with minimal refurbishment in between, it would drastically reduce the cost of each mission. That would be a game changer not just for lunar exploration, but for every aspect of spaceflight moving forward. This test is more than just about proving that the hardware works, it's about validating the very concept of how future missions to the Moon, Mars, and beyond can be launched affordably and frequently. The last test flight also taught SpaceX a lot of valuable lessons, especially about heat shielding, engine shutdown procedures, and how to better coordinate the stage separation. All of these are areas that needed improvement, and the company has been working around the clock at their Starbase facility in Texas to make sure that this time they're ready. Engineers have tweaked the flight profile, upgraded avionics, and applied new heat-resistant materials to the re-entry tiles. It's essentially another big leap forward in the learning curve, and even if it doesn't go perfectly, it will push the program closer to its goal of routine, safe, and efficient spaceflight. Meanwhile, NASA is watching all of this very closely because the future of their Artemis program heavily depends on SpaceX's success. The Starship vehicle is not just a commercial rocket in this scenario, it is literally the landing system that will deliver NASA astronauts to the surface of the Moon for the first time in over 50 years. If SpaceX fails to demonstrate reliability soon, it could throw the entire timeline for Artemis missions into chaos. NASA has already canceled or delayed other key parts of the mission architecture, like the Gateway Station, so their reliance on Starship is greater than ever. A failed Starship launch in the coming months could mean years of delays for America's return to the lunar surface. This makes the geopolitical contrast even more stark. While the U.S. program appears to be struggling with internal budget cuts and uncertain timelines, China and Russia are pushing forward with bold and clearly defined goals. They're committing not only to build a moon base, but also to power it with the most reliable form of energy currently available for off-world operations. The announcement of a nuclear power plant on the moon may have sounded far-fetched just a few years ago, but now it's shaping up to be a very real possibility. That possibility is backed by 2 nations with deep pockets, authoritarian control and long-term vision, something that democratic systems often struggle to match. The idea of a lunar nuclear reactor raises plenty of technical questions, but also serious geopolitical concerns. For decades, outer space has been treated as a neutral zone, a place where no one country holds sovereignty. But when nuclear technology gets involved, especially with nations like Russia, it's bound to raise alarms. Even though both countries insist this power plant is for peaceful scientific use, the capability to generate consistent and powerful energy on the moon could open the door for future military applications. A power plant today could become a radar station, a communication outpost, or even a weapons platform in the future, depending on how the technology evolves and the intentions behind it shift. Moreover, the presence of nuclear material on the moon could become a flashpoint in future space diplomacy. Treaties like the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 strictly prohibit the placement of nuclear weapons in space, but a power plant falls into a gray area that hasn't been well defined. The international community may soon find itself in a difficult debate over whether this project is a violation of those treaties or simply the next logical step in deep space infrastructure. Either way, the outcome will likely shape the future of space law and governance for decades to come. Countries like the United States, India, Japan, and members of the European Space Agency will have to decide whether to compete, collaborate, or try to regulate these ambitious plans. It's not just about politics or power plays, though. The development of a nuclear power plant on the moon could also revolutionize the scientific community's ability to conduct long-term experiments in deep space. Imagine running sophisticated labs on the lunar surface, powered by stable energy 24/7, free from Earth's interference. Telescopes could be installed to scan the universe without atmospheric distortion, and geology labs could study lunar soil in real time. Astronomers, physicists, and planetary scientists would have the tools and environment they need to pursue some of the biggest mysteries of the universe without relying on limited time slots or energy reserves. It would truly be a new age of space research. This level of technological advancement also plays into humanity's ultimate goal of becoming a multiplanetary species. The moon has always been considered a stepping stone to Mars and beyond, but before we can launch interplanetary missions, we need a solid foothold. A base that can generate its own power, support life systems, and enable robotic or human presence is the essential foundation. China and Russia seem to understand that and are investing accordingly. While the US has similar goals on paper, the recent cuts in NASA's funding send mixed messages about its long-term commitment to deep space infrastructure. If the momentum continues to shift eastward, we might see the first permanent human settlement in space come under a Chinese or Russian flag. It's also worth considering how private companies will fit into this evolving space race. While governments plan and collaborate, companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others are creating the tools that might make those plans a reality. SpaceX's model of rapid iteration and reusability could give the West a competitive edge if properly supported. However, if financial and political backing begins to falter, that advantage could quickly slip away. Unlike China's state-backed model, which combines government oversight with industrial might, the U.S. still relies heavily on public-private partnerships that can be fragile and unpredictable. Without strong alignment between government goals and commercial capabilities, progress could stall just as rivals are accelerating. Looking ahead, the next few years will likely determine the future leadership of space exploration. Whichever nation or alliance manages to establish a reliable, energy-independent presence on the moon will gain enormous scientific, economic, and strategic benefits. This isn't just a space race for bragging rights, it's about controlling the infrastructure of the next frontier. Energy, logistics, communication, and transport will all depend on who lays the groundwork now. And with plans already in motion, China and Russia are positioning themselves to lead. Whether or not they succeed will depend on engineering, diplomacy, and a bit of luck. But one thing is clear: the game has changed and the moon is no longer just a destination, it's becoming the next battleground for global influence.